Almost 3/4 of the Earth is covered by water, and the oceans of the world contain 97% of all the water found on Earth. The oceans are home to a rich diversity of life. Most of that life inhabits what we know as the shallow seas. Shallow seas are found all over the world over a varying degree of latitudes. Surface temperatures follow similar rules as terrestrial biomes, mostly dependent on latitude and location. But as the depth increases, temperature is more controlled by the shape of the basin. The seafloor in this biome is normally characterized by a depth of around 200 meters, and makes up what is known as the continental shelf. You might be wondering how deep 200 meters is. Well, the deepest parts of the shallow seas are in the aphotic zone, mostly devoid of light. Sometimes the aphotic zone will begin at depths less than 200 meters if there is a large amount of organic material in the upper parts of the water column. Speaking of darkness, there's a carnivorous sponge normally found in the deep ocean that was discovered to be living in sea caves in the Mediterranean. The caves mimic the environment of the deep sea, making it possible for this species to live in a more shallow environment. But how did they get there? These sponges are a sedentary species. We may understand pretty soon. This species of sponge was discovered in sea caves in the northeast Atlantic just a few years ago. And this is pretty cool because up until then, we only thought they were endemic to the deep oceans and Mediterranean. What this means for us is that we still don't fully understand everything about this biome, and it would behoove ourselves to prioritize conservation so we can learn all that we can. Conservation efforts are also important because it's sometimes hard to predict what species we will find in different locations. Biodiversity in the Red Sea is very high, but patterns of endemism never exceed 15% in any location. This basically means that no more than 15% of species in the Red Sea are only found in that specific location. This implies that geographic location isn't a big factor on the ability of species to establish a population, and it's more affected by the individual species' physiological characteristics. This makes planning for conservation a little more tricky. Coral reefs are a kind of ecological system within shallow seas that are in particular need of conservation. They have incredible biodiversity, akin to that of tropical rainforests. To support an ecosystem like this, you need primary producers. One such primary producer found in shallow seas is algae. Algae accounts for nearly all primary production in aquatic ecosystems, so it's important for science to know how much energy they make. Normally, we extrapolate from measuring small samples of algae to make guesses at the whole community. In a study from 2012, we found that this method of measuring at the individual level often overpredicts and gives a false impression of productivity. Increasing the sample size from half a liter to 30 liters can give a more accurate measure by taking into account interactions within the algal community. With impending climate change, the oceans are expected to experience several stresses. Ocean acidification will have disastrous effects on ecosystems. Many species will go extinct if we cannot control the pH. With much of our global populations living in coastal areas, sea level rise will affect us greatly. Some of those areas with very dense populations on the coast are China and Indonesia. In equatorial regions like Indonesia, it's not uncommon to experience sea level fluctuations over a long period of time. In the past 500 years, the Indian Ocean has seen changes from being about 10 centimeters lower to 50 centimeters higher than the level that it's at now. However, the sea level rise that's occurring now is not on the same scale or magnitude. There's the potential for millions of people to be displaced within a matter of decades due to rising sea levels. This would be absolutely catastrophic. It is imperative that we work to gain control over the climate change we are causing, both for shallow seas ecosystems and ourselves.